Hi everyone, it's Rebecca Fithian here from the Blue Balloon Theatre podcast. Just before this episode begins, I wanted to provide a content warning for anybody that might need it. These content warnings will also be written in the description of the podcast. At approximately 16 minutes into the podcast until 17 minutes, there is mention of a poet that suffered a car crash a couple of years ago and their recovery in hospital, as well as Sarah Everard. At approximately 29 minutes and 30 seconds, there is brief mention of Prime Facie, the play, it being about rape and the injustice surrounding this story. That section will end at approximately 30 minutes and 45 seconds. Finally, at approximately 36 minutes and 50 seconds for the following minute, there is brief mention of the Hillsborough Law Project, Grenfell, and the politics surrounding these topics. Feel free to skip these sections and listen to the rest of the amazing episode with Jen Corcoran. Hello everyone and welcome back to Blue Balloon Theatre's podcast. We are 6 episodes into our relaunch and we hope you've been enjoying each of the episodes. Honestly, it's been such a joy chatting to such wonderful creatives from all across the industry. And today I am joined by yet another wonderful person, poet, mother, legend, full stop, Jen Corcoran. Hello Jen, how are you?
Hello, thank you. That's very kind of you.
I mean, very fitting, I feel, for you. You are quite honestly just a force to be reckoned with, I believe. And first and foremost, I really like to sort of chat to you, for anyone that doesn't already know you, to tell us a bit about yourself, like what you do creatively, because you've got many strings to your bow.
Yes, I'm quite busy. I do a lot of things. I sort of dread that when I meet people and go, "What do you do?" And I just try and think which answer will be the most interesting, or do I just tell you all of it at once? So obviously the poetry is how we know one another. But I've only come to that fairly late. But in the background of that is performing because I've been involved with theatre for a long time. Like I did performing arts at college and I've been a member of a local theatre for 25 years now, which is a bit insane, which is really cool.
Wow.
So I'm involved in that in multiple ways, performing, and it's a volunteer-run theatre, so you can get really involved with quite a lot of the elements of it, from choosing the plays and marketing it and getting involved with what audiences want and stuff like that. So that's the creative side of it. And then in the last few years, I've sort of found myself immersed in events planning because I thought there was a gap for a Pride event where I live, and sort of walked away from a Joe Lycett gig where he talked about just creating one. I was like, I'm going to do that where I live. And then once I'd said it to a couple of people, I thought, oh, I'd better do it now, hadn't I? Because it had fallen flat a few times. So that's another really interesting creative outlet, is connecting with other creatives and trying to create events and things like that, and then being inspired really, I suppose, by being part of the poetry community and seeing that the events you've done. My first ever event was a Blue Balloon event, so it's just really, I think when you are creative, being around other creatives just sparks it, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
I think that the drama side of it's always been there. I was definitely very dramatic even as a child. I remember that it was just so empathetic that I would cry very easily if I thought something was a bit emotional. So I had to be taken out of the cinema because I just did not realise there'd be a happy ending to Fever Goes West. And then this, I can't even watch the end of the Snowman now. I can't watch Up
Oh, you know
because
what?
I was just so sad when the snowman melted. They let me go home in the fancy dress clothes.
Oh, I feel that. That
Yeah.
resonates with me on a very deep level, and I'm sure many of our listeners will
Yeah.
feel the same. And I have to pick up on what you've just said about being empathetic. That is something that I have felt for so long as a creative, as a person, that I feel other people's sort of emotions and grief or joy in the same sort of capacity they do. And it's never in a selfish or self-centered way. It's always sort of with them in a very
Yeah.
empathetic way. And I think that can be such a wonderful trait to have as a creative and a performer, especially because you're
Yeah.
able to use that in performance. And I love what you were saying about the theatre that you have done shows at and how it's volunteer led. And I really like that sense of community.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, you still do shows now, and I know that to be true, but
Yes. Yeah.
How is that kind of community vibe? Does that kind of change things for you as opposed to more commercial theatre?
It's just sort of all I've known. I fell into it almost because I was always interested in drama, but I think that there were less sort of options and possibilities. I think when I was at school, people weren't going to college in other towns and cities in the same way, and you didn't have the internet to research spotlights and stuff. So I think when I was younger, I was a bit like, oh, I'd like to do acting, but I think I need to look at a proper job. That's the kind of vibes that it was, I think, at the time. So I did it as a hobby type thing and just became more and more involved. But it's a lovely community because there's a lot of people there who are there in their second or third generation, and it's a local theatre group that the dramatic club formed over 100 years ago, and then because there were people that had the privilege of having a bit of money as well, they invested in building a purpose-built theatre, which is like this 400-seater little theatre that puts on 13 shows of its own a year and then has sublets in as well. And because it's so volunteer-led, there's all these little sub-communities of like this, the people who do the teas and coffees and the people who do the bar and the people who do the tickets, and I think it's really nice because I've been there a long time and I've stayed in my hometown. There are some people who've been there far longer than me and they still see me as quite new. But then you see other people come and go and other people come and stay. And it's a really, really nice place to be because I think because people are all there for the same reason. I think the reason I like being involved in theatre is that empathy as well, isn't it? Because you get to try on someone else's life or learn about someone, the research that goes into it and all of that stuff I find the most interesting. The most recent play I did was called The Revlon Girl, and it was about the aftermath of the Aberfan tragedy, which in 1966, for anyone who doesn't know, there was a really horrible tragedy when one of the coal tips slipped and it engulfed this village because it was at the bottom of the valley, and it absolutely wiped out the junior school, and the death toll was absolutely tragic. And it's a really difficult thing to tell, but because the coal board took such a long time to accept responsibility, it's so important to keep telling the story and keep reminding people about the fact that people deserve justice and people shouldn't be silenced because they're working class and they don't have access to that world. So it was really important to do, and but it was important to know that it was written by someone that was sensitive to the area and all of those things, and that the angle they'd taken was looking at the mothers who was a real life situation. They used to meet in the Aberfan Hotel, and they once invited a Revlon girl because they're just living through the unimaginable, but they just wanted to feel normal. They just wanted to feel like something frivolous or light or joyful or get back to who they were before or something. So they invited someone in the play. It's brilliant because of the different characters explore the different types of grief, and that experience was so bonding. And I've been there for a long time. One of the women in it's been there much longer than me, and her mum's been chair and everything. And there's another one who's a lot newer, and someone who was brand new to our production and American as well. So she was learning all the stuff about the culture as well as the history. And I think doing that show has bonded us in such a way that we'll always be really, really close. And it's like a Venn diagram of connection around the place. And I think it's a great place to be. So I think that's probably why I spend so much time there.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right. When you're working on a show, especially that tells a true story like that, that is so
Mm,
important to that particular area and those people, especially. I think you do make much stronger bonds with the people you're performing with, and that connection to that area, it is so important to share stories like
yeah,
that. You know, there are many shows that are connected to maybe Manchester people, or Liverpool, or any city really. You
yeah,
know, that there are stories from people all around, and to share stories like that and to keep those memories alive is so important for people. It does allow them the space to remember, or to
yeah.
grieve, or to feel happy about whatever it may be. That's the beauty of storytelling, really, isn't it? And we're both, every now and again we'll
Love
exchange a little message here and there about theatre, and I'm here for it. I love it.
it.
um because I think it's so lovely to find somebody else that has a very genuine love for theatre and for
Yeah.
sort of making it happen and putting these kind of shows on. That being said, we do like a good musical. We do like a bit of feel
Oh,
good.
yeah. You've got to have a bit of everything, haven't you? You've got to have the escapism as well. And yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of it. You can have something for everyone, and that's I think it's why it's so good. We put so many shows on. It can be challenging, but there's just different things depending on what you want to go and see, and I think it makes you go and see stuff because you're like, I wouldn't really go to that play, but my mate's in it, so I'll go and support them because it's quid pro quo, isn't it? You want to be supportive, and I think that's really important. And there's some plays where on paper I thought, oh, not that keen. Then it's been absolutely brilliant. Then there's others where it's not my cup of tea, but that's okay as well. And
Yeah,
they put on so
definitely.
many different ones. It's just it's really good to be part of and really interesting. And because the audience is different every night, live performance is so um communication with the audience is really vital, and it can range depending on what you're doing, can't it? So like something that's just a comedy and it's really light, you get laughs that you didn't expect and you have to be ready for it. And
Yeah,
or if you do something that's really intimate, like your one woman show that you did, or it was that was, that's very stark, isn't it? And so when we perform in the bar, it's those sort of vibes. And
yeah,
it's really such a privilege to have the opportunity to do both types, because the parts I've played before that recently, I did Abigail's Party, which was an absolute bucket list dream of a role to play Beverly in that, because it's so iconic. And because it's quite a grotesque character in some ways, you've got to find the humanity. And I think that when you're an actor, you really want to find the best qualities in that person that you're
yeah,
playing. So I was like, well,
100%.
maybe she's really snippy because she can't have babies, and maybe it's, and right, maybe that's why she says she doesn't want them, and just putting all this extra stuff into it. And I do wonder how, when professional actors play somebody who's a really challenging character, when they're playing a biopic of somebody who's done something really awful, they must have to hook onto that. And I do think that's
Definitely.
ultimately is a good quality, to find the balance in people.
Yeah,
It
I would
makes life
totally
a lot easier,
agree.
doesn't it?
It does. It does. I think, like you said, finding the humanity in each of these characters. I mean, I've trying to think of characters that I've played. I've gone from being a Christmassy elf that's probably got OCD to a very young girl that falls in love with a soldier, and through all of that, you do have to find the truth in the
Yeah,
character you're playing, even if it is completely, heightened and very sort of whimsical and fun. And you do have to connect to, you connect all the little dots together and you make it
yeah,
as real as you can. um and it's such a, like you were saying before, it's such a brilliant challenge to take on. And doing all of that research into the characters. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't do quite as much research, disclaimer, for the elf. Okay, I'm gonna say it now.
spoilers. I've been an elf once.
Oh, it's
It
just,
was so much fun. I've got a friend who runs a party and entertainment company, and they were short on elves one year, and we got to like sail into Botany Bay on a barge,
oh my god.
and I had this glitter on, and ultimately I was like, I'm never taking this glitter off. I love this glitter. And then when I got to, in my Christmas pajamas later on, even though it was September or something, and I was trying to take the glitter off, I was like, I'm never putting glitter on ever again. Like I was finding it for weeks, but I did still love it. But I enjoyed it, and I must say that I didn't really put a lot of character work into it, if I'm honest. But actually, that sort of stuff, you're picking up on the about Christmas and pantos and elves, and like it's really nice because it's like getting to experience it again.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it is such a joyful experience. I mean, I've got many memories of like running alongside reindeers and like, working with alongside children that have all different kinds of needs, and just seeing their joy when they see your joy at Christmas and what it can be and how fun it is. That just makes it all worthwhile, really. It really does. But I mean, we've talked a little bit about theatre and your connection to theatre, and we talked a little bit about performance as well. And you made a really valid point there about audiences, which kind of inspired me to ask you a little bit about your journey with poetry. You mentioned before that you sort of came into poetry a little bit later. Um, Talk to us about that. How did that even come about?
I have always, I think, had sort of poetry and writing and things in the background. I've always leant towards doing creative writing and stuff anyway. And I think that for me, poetry is sort of, I would write songs, only I can't write music, and I can only play bits of instruments by ear. And I'm not like confident with singing. So I think it's almost like going from thinking about songs to taking the music out of them and making them about poetry. And I think when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have got into it because I was quite, well, it has to rhyme or I have to know what the structure is. Or I was very much more uptight. And now I've got a bit older, like, thank goodness I've calmed down a little bit and chilled out a little bit. But I was following Rebecca Kenny, who's the founder of Written Off Publishing, on socials because we knew each other in person anyway. And we'd met, she was living where I live in Southport, and we've got children that are a similar age, and we connected through some other stuff. So I happened to follow her, and I thought, oh, it's brilliant that she does all this poetry. One day I might post some poetry, but oh, and you worry about like, what if people read it and they don't like it? What if nobody sees it? And there's, you have all these little anxieties as a performer, don't you? And then it was, I can remember it really clearly because it was the early hours of the 2nd of October, which is one of my kids' birthdays. And I'd been out for the first time since I'd had the baby in June. Um, and I got in and I was on I was on Instagram and I saw on stories this poem that Rebecca had written comparing a chance car crash with oil in the road with the misfortune that happened to poor Sarah Everard with that whole case because that had just been on trial. And I thought, oh, God, that's a powerful analogy, like an absolute gut punching analogy. And then the next slide, she's in a neck brace and it's a selfie in a neck brace. And I was like, what? And so then it was, then I realized she'd actually had a crash and had written this whilst on opiates, legally prescribed opiates, in a major trauma unit. And I thought, oh, if she can write a poem and post it while she thinks she might have a broken spine, I really don't. I mean, what at what point do I just think, do you know what, just post something? And she'd been doing these hump day haikus, and I used to just message her one. And so I just started popping them on like Canva tiles, and I thought it doesn't have to be about anyone else's view. It doesn't matter whether anyone likes say, let's treat this like an electronic scrapbook. But then through that, she was like, oh, I really love performing. And she had already seen her perform. I'd sort of dragged myself to, it was in the woods somewhere, I can't remember, but there was quite a few people there that I've met since. And that was the first time she'd performed, which was early that year. And I don't know what had possessed me to drag a baby in a pram through the woods towards the twinkly lights with an oozing C-section wound, which was the position at the time. It was just really very out of character for me to be like, no, we must push a pram up a hill through the forest. And I think I was just being drawn to the poetry. So yeah, so I stayed in touch with her, and then she was doing Heaton Park. It was one of the Blue Balloon events, wasn't she, that December?
Yeah.
And also Clitheroe Castle, one Northern Poetry, one of Brian's events. And so I just sort of thought, oh, in for a penny. And I think I might have even got a cancellation slot or something. I think I might have asked to do it, and then someone dropped out and sort of schlepped over. And because I am a bit of a show off, I do like a bit of performing. I was quite hooked on that really. So because I was on maternity leave, I had a lot more time, and because I was writing about the baby because she was so attached to me, literally, I was then writing about the other kids because I've got 5 children. So which sounds really exciting. Like people go, oh my gosh, 5 children. But I'm not like one of those Instagram mums with like 7 plates doing like mass produced meals and things. 2 of them are adults. So it's, a bit of, just to clarify, I just have them in batches, like a political experiment. But yeah, so that just sort of quite hooked then. And I was just writing for sort of just for a little bit of catharsis or a little bit of observation or whatever was crossing my mind, and picking up poetry prompts, and just thought it was a really nice way to connect whilst I was on leave and those sorts of things, and it just snowballed from that.
Amazing. That's
It's
amazing
quite a
to
long answer,
hear.
wasn't it?
I love it. You took us on the journey. Like this is main character energy. I love it. Um, I kind of love that as well. I feel for many people, there's always a bit of a nudge, there's a bit of a sign from the universe or from a person that sort of says to
Yeah.
them, now's the time. And I think you with Rebecca, that was it. That seeing that post and that poem
Yeah,
was your sign. And I had a very
yeah, absolutely.
similar sort of experience in that I was speaking to somebody, doing a bit of a Q&A actually for Blue Balloon. This was many years ago during lockdown. And it was a friend of mine from Lipper, turned poet, incredible poet, genuinely wonderful. And I remember, from friend to friend in this Q&A, she sort of said, what are you waiting for? Just do it. I have no doubt that your words are going to be, sort of worth reading, worth listening to. And I just sort of went, all right, yeah, maybe I will then.
Love that.
There is just that moment of,
yeah,
now's the time that I need to share this with the world. And suddenly all those feelings of like, oh, are people going to like it? How's it going to be perceived? Is this going to go down like a lead balloon? They kind of go out of the window because it's more important for you as a creative to let that out ultimately. And
yeah,
that, I think, for many of us within the poetry scene in Manchester especially, and around Manchester, we have this real need to just let out our inner thoughts, our inner musings, and share them. And that it makes it so raw and so vulnerable, but also really relatable as a result. A perfect example is Poetry in the Park. I think every single time we've run one of those events, there's always been at least 2 or 3 poets that have read something really sensitive, and I'm like, oh my god, that was beautiful. Like, I leave filled with this sense of like joy that they've had the courage to share that,
yeah,
but also this sort of connection to them, because actually their experience of the world or of life or mental health, whatever it is actually not too dissimilar from my own and many other people's. Yeah, I feel like writing generally, not just poetry, but writing generally has that wonderful quality where, we can connect to other people. And it comes right back to storytelling. That's how we can connect to other people. It shows how important it is within our community. Yeah, I mean, I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, my God.
No, it's interesting as well at being inspired by other people being open, because when I was first writing I was a bit self-conscious, so writing about my kids was fun, and with the older ones I checked they were okay with it and that kind of thing. But there were other stuff that there may be the more dark and twisty stuff. I thought, no, I'm just going to leave that, because I think I had a sense that in my brain, a little bit of me was a bit like, oh, do you know, if I uncork this Pandora's box, that might become my whole personality, and I'll just have an emo phase rather too late. And I don't know why I thought that would be the case, but I was wary of it, because I think you can be asking for a bit more emotional investment from people when you're going a bit dark and a bit deeper, and I'm not sure I was ready to do that until I knew I could do it with the context of other stuff and be a bit irreverent the next day, and that would be okay. And actually, I would say that because your stuff is brilliant, and you've got some really open stuff about mental health stuff, but it's always got that, like, I'm being very real, but I'm being quite optimistic, and I'm also acknowledging that this has happened and it might happen again, but it will also pass. And because you've got that real aura around your more raw work, I thought, I think I can do this. I think I can do a bit of this. So when I did submit, I did slip a couple of the ones that I was a bit like, oh gosh, into the collection. And I really would say that you inspired me to do that, because you've got a really clear style, but it's not restricted to one genre. Do you know what I mean? So I found that really inspirational. And I think it's a bit like what we were saying about the acting and finding the hook in the character. It's authenticity and it's sincerity, isn't it? It's not hooking on to what other people feel. It's you just being yourself. And I think that transcends everything. So even if someone doesn't speak English, they could go to a poetry night and know what the feelings were, in the way I don't speak Italian, but I could follow an opera. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I lost you for a minute then, but we're back on track. I think what you were saying was it's
We're back. This is a contemplative moment.
Honestly, guys, do not ever record on Zoom. It's a nightmare. There's always technical issues somewhere. But what you were saying was that it's the feeling and the atmosphere it can create. It doesn't matter what language it's in, but poetry and music as well, it can be so powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
Perfect example. This is a complete segue, and I'm only saying it because I've literally got the t-shirt on. This is Karia, right? Karia entered the Eurovision Song Contest a couple of years ago and represented Finland and did the song Cha Cha Cha. Now, ever since then, I've been absolutely obsessed with this Finnish rapper, right? I don't have a clue what he's actually saying. I've never translated. it's in Finnish. I've never translated the lyrics, but it doesn't matter because they're absolute bops. Honestly, his style, his presence, and his rapping, he's superb. He really is. But yeah, I mean, it just shows you like it really doesn't matter whether you understand what is being said.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the energy that it sort of transcends
That's why Eurovision works as well.
exactly. It transcends into the audience. The audience love it. I mean, don't get me started on Eurovision because I mean, I literally went last year and it was on.
Oh, I forgot that you were. Yeah, of course.
I cannot guys. If you're listening to this and you're looking for a sign to go to Eurovision, this is your sign to go to Eurovision. It's like nothing else I've ever experienced. It's like that feeling you get when you go to Ed Fringe for the first time and everything's just wacky and
Beautiful chaos, isn't it?
yeah, it literally is. And everyone's just there for a good time. So, like, we made so many friends. Some were from Australia, some were
Amazing.
from Ireland. Some, you wouldn't believe it. The first people we chatted to from Manchester in the UK.
Stop.
And I was like, are you joking? We've come all
You're
this
next.
way.
I could meet you around the corner. Get out of my face.
Honestly. But yeah, going back to what we were
Amazing.
saying before, like, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, let's chat about your book because I absolutely love your poetry. Full stop. Hence why I asked you to read at my book launch because I was looking at all the people's work that I really admire and that I believe is authentic, and you came to mind. And
Oh,
your poetry is very it just sort of delves much deeper than surface level, and I love that. It's very true to you, and you speak about motherhood, you speak about mental health as well, you speak about loads of things in your book. But chat to us about it for anyone that doesn't know the book. How would you kind of sum it up?
I think in a nutshell, it encompasses the different hats that women wear, and not to take away from men having dual roles. I just think women have to do bit more because that's where the title is taken for. It's skewed some lyrics, so it's called Witch Mother Child Lover, so it's a bit of a riff on the Meredith Brooks song, and the change in mother and child, mother and lover around was inadvertent, but it's just how it ended up, and it actually works really well. So I do like a bit of spooky witch stuff, and so obviously, like you got to shout out to Alice Godwin at that point, haven't you? Like the ultimate witchy.
Yeah,
So
100%.
that kind of stuff I love. I love being able to embrace that side of it, and also Sam, who's is the brilliant cover artist, and we've all got that kind of we like that Il Destino vibe, and like even I pick up people's poetry books sometimes and just open them on a page and treat them like they're a tarot deck or something, because sometimes you can just get a nice little, oh yeah, that'll send me on my way today. So there's the witch bit is all that side of it, and about intuition and and keeping that in mind, and then the connection with my mum and my kids, and then some of the poems are for my children. So as I said before, when I first started sharing, it was much more focused on that because I was in my little maternity leave bubble, really. So the child section's that, and then some of it reflects maybe on stuff when I was younger, because with it being the first collection, it's a bit like your first album, isn't it? It's got all your angst in it that you need to get out of the way before you get onto your difficult second album. And then the love a bit where I started to get a little bit braver about talking about intimacy and relationships, and so it's got a few different things in it, and I would say it's probably got a bit of a political slant as well, because you were kind enough to be one of the people who read the manuscript, and so you're my front cover quote, which is really cute. Yeah, because I was like, yeah, it's political because as Rebecca said, so it's on the front of the book. So because that's the other side hustle. That's not a side hustle. I think all of us that are creatives and left wing and socialist, and that we're all political in everything that we do, aren't we? So there's some like overtly political stuff in there, because I think people should have the right to strike on all of those things. And then another one of the poems in there that I didn't even plan to write it. I was going to Nata, which is another spoken word night, and I had in my head, I was like, I'm going to try some comedy because I once did stand-up comedy for a charity thing. And I thought, I got a face for radio. I'm going to say some funny stuff. It's going to be great. I'm going to rock up in Bolton and be hilarious. And then I watched Prima Facie the day before in the National Theatre, the Jodie Comer
Yeah.
one. So trigger warning for anyone that doesn't know about that, but it's about rape and the aftermath and the court case and everything. And I was so incensed by it because obviously there's a lot of injustice, and it's a real trigger for me is injustice and perception of injustice. And so while I was on the train, I was like, oh, furiously typing into my notes app. So I ended up rocking up going, yeah, I'm going to do a bit of comedy, guys, and then just doing this like quite meaningful poem about rape and the men and women's roles and things like that. So that ended up in there as well. So it's a real mixture. But so hopefully there's something for everybody, whether you like reading about babies or you like reading about going on strike. There's something for everybody in this book.
I would say so, definitely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I was one of the first people to read it, very, very proud of that fact. And I just remember thinking every time I turned the page, it took me somewhere else. It made me think of my mum, my gran, and the connection that we all had. It made me think of how political I am and how important that is in my own life. It made me think about days that haven't even arrived yet, and if I ever have children, that kind of thing. And it was such a lovely experience to read your book. Like, I cannot recommend it enough to anybody that is listening or watching this podcast. Jen is a superb writer, and full stop. That's it. Underline.
It just sort of comes out, doesn't it? I think
Yeah, it does.
it must be an amalgamation of learning, because I was thinking this the other day. One of my children's about to do GCSE in English literature this year because they do it in year 10 at her school. And so she's studying poetry because she's got to do an exam. And I just thought, I'm not sure I know all that much about it, which feels a bit naughty, really. Do you know what I mean? I know that I like an internal rhyme, like you like an internal rhyme.
Yeah.
I'm like a little pun things, and I like that when you find people's little hooks and their voices and things, even when it's a broad spectrum of stuff. But she's doing poet, and I just thought, oh gosh, don't know enough about it. So I find it fascinating that some of the poets, like, they really know about structure and stuff, don't they? And they will be like, I've done a sonnet, or I've done a this, or I've done a that, and that's brilliant as well, because that speaks to the geeky side. So I like to learn to do certain types of poetry, but then
Yeah.
most stuff is just, I think the most of the stuff in my, it's a real mixture. Like, I really like an acrostic, and some people really don't like an acrostic. And so that's, for anyone that doesn't know, it's when the first line of the first letter of every line spells something down the page. And I like a shape poem and things to look fun on the page. But yeah, I was on an open mic online once, and someone was like, I hate acrostics. And I was like, please don't buy my book then, because there's a little section of them. I was like, oh well, sorry. I love
Honestly,
them. They're like a puzzle and a bit mathsy.
they are. Like, I mean, I get it. Everyone's got personal taste. They're gonna like and dislike
Yeah.
certain things, but don't rule them out. Like, don't rule out any type of poetry, because you never know when it's
Yeah.
gonna strike you with inspiration, or whether you're gonna really enjoy it or not. I mean, I one sort of structure I really want to try is a tanker, because I've heard a lot of people read a tanker out, and there's something really interesting about them. I've not quite sussed
What
it
is it?
out. Honestly, I can't even remember.
What do you know? What do we know of it?
So, for any poetry nerds out there, I apologize. I'm probably going to get this royally wrong. But it's like there's like a repeated phrase or something that connects two
Okay.
sections together.
Right.
And there has to be one of the lines, if I remember right, one of the lines meant it speaks about your surroundings. And I was like,
Ooh.
this is very interesting. I haven't
Ooh.
tried this before. But I mean, this is a perfect example of me. I'm the same as you, Jen. Like, I've never studied poetry apart from at school, and I hated it. Like, genuinely hated it. And I discovered poetry, like spoken word poetry, for the first time in 2017. And funnily enough, I was at Edinburgh Fringe, went to this really tiny bar in the corner of Edinburgh with a bunch of people I was doing a show with. And one of them had kind of coaxed us all into going and said, it's going to be great. I'm going to read And then one of the other girls in the cast said, "Oh, I'm going to read as well." And I'm like, "All right, guys, since when do you write poetry?" And it was so amazing to see them kind of speak their truths in that way, because I'd never seen anybody do that. And then I saw this woman, for the life of me, I do not remember what she was called, but she'd been on like BBC Radio with her poetry, and she was quite big. She had a collection out, and I heard her words, and I was like, "Oh wow, like this is it. This is the moment that my opinion on poetry is changing." And since then, it's kind of snowballed, like you were saying before. It snowballs, doesn't it? Once you've experienced that, you're kind of seeking out all these different experiences of open mics and reading other people's works. I mean, I I've lost count now of how many like poetry books and collections I've read from different people, and some of them I've gone, "Oh my god, that was a load of tripe, that was awful." But it's no kind of discredit to the author, because I appreciate and know how much hard work and time goes into writing. It's just that it wasn't for me. And then there's times when you read something and it just connects with you on a very different level. And I remember feeling that with Harry Baker, his work especially, because he's always bringing humor into his poetry, and I always like doing that myself. So to see that done in such an effortless way, where he was so unashamedly quirky as well as a person, I was like, "Oh wow, like this is like goals." Do you know what I mean? If I can get to this level, I'll be happy. I mean, I met him once, and I swear to God, I must have gone white. I was like, "Oh my God, you're literally the reason why I wanted to get my work published."
I love that when you're just like, I want to spew all of my words. Like, I don't quite know what to say. And I did it to Andy Burnham the other week. I was just like,
"Oh my
thank you
God."
for what you're doing with the Hillsborough Law Project. And I was at Manchester, but no, like I was fine. Everything was fine. And, da, 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 da. And I don't know, you're really busy. And he was such a hon. Like, he was so lovely, because obviously it was absolutely everybody wanted to speak to him, and he needed to be in different places. And I was like, and our council moved a motion on the Hillsborough Law Project, and because that's about redressing justice, which goes back to what we said about Aberfan, and it's not just about Hillsborough, it's about Grenfell, it's about all of those things, and that, you know, that this government want to get that into law. But he was so nice and so warm and so everything you would expect him to be, and was like, you know, thanks so much for coming over. And he must have had so many people go over, but that, I think, you know, when people respect you connecting with what they're doing and they reciprocate, it's a really powerful thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
It's just like, what a hon. And did you get like a positive response back?
I did, yeah. He was genuinely, I mean, it was that moment, like you just said, of, "Oh, he's got so many other people to see him. Like, he's probably just going to be like, yeah, thanks, bye." But actually, he was like, "Oh, that's really lovely to hear. Like, oh, like best of luck with it." And that's absolutely amazing. And I left, and I was sobbing it literally. My partner was like, "It's all right, there," and I was just inconsolable, because it's like when you meet your heroes, isn't it? Like that's what it is. You can't really describe how it feels, but just to know that you've said what you wanted to say to them, and it was received in such a warm and welcoming way. It feels like a bit of a full circle moment in a lovely way. And I love that you met Andy Burnham. Oh,
I didn't plan to speak to him. I just was a bit overcome with wanting to say, I think this is brilliant, and you know, and just spew stuff. And I went to see Holly McNish in Liverpool earlier this year, and she was really lovely. And I like that she does stuff in the way she looks at stuff, and she's got a really good delivery. And she got this book out called Lobsters. So I got these lobster earrings because, you know, I'm like so cool like that. And then she said she was calling it Lobster because it was about addressing things that you hate. And she hates lobster, or she was scared of something. And then I'm queuing up to have my book signed, and I'm like covering my ears and my earrings, and I was like, I got these lobster earrings because I thought it was cool because he maps the book, but I didn't know what the meaning of it was. So sorry, don't look at them or something like that. And she was like, no, I love them. You look amazing. She was so nice.
Oh my
I
God.
was just like, I'm such an absolute freak, honestly.
I literally
I
love
sort of was
that.
okay with it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta go with it. Like, I've that is just so funny. I actually can't believe that.
What I need.
I feel like I've definitely done that before. I mean, my God, I've been really fortunate to meet some really wonderful people that I consider to be idols. And I remember the first time that sort of happened, I just went bright red, didn't say a thing, and I was like, I was a teenager at the time, and because my mum works at the Palace Theatre, still works there now. Actually, I'll have to get mum onto the podcast, definitely. I just remember thinking, oh my God, like my mum's got me to meet this. It was Richard Fleischman, who at the time, now, oh my God, right. Richard Fleischman is a performer, a fantastic performer, right? He's got a great voice, but a teenage girl, right? I was fanatical about Richard Fleischman. So I was just stood there like, hello. I was beside myself. But no, I mean, that's such a lovely story. I mean, Holly McNish is brilliant.
She's so brilliant, isn't she? She was on in Liverpool, so because we were supposed to go like maybe last year or something. One of my friends really likes her and said, "Oh, should we go?" And we planned for a group of 4 of us to go, and then one by one, we all got things that meant we couldn't go. So when I saw she was coming again, we went and had a little double date, and it was all very exciting.
Amazing.
It was very lovely.
I love that.
Well, so cute.
It's been so lovely to chat to you, Jen, today. It really, really has. You've been such a breath of fresh air on this podcast. And it's been amazing to hear about your journey, about your writing, a little bit sort of close up. Do you know what I mean? Like we put the spotlight on you in the best way.
I'm so shy. I just did so much.
It's all lies, guys. It's all lies.
I'm a total wallflower. You know what? I know we need to wrap up because I've been chatting for ages, but did you know I've got a special link to Eurovision?
No, tell me everything.
The number one song when I was born was Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz. So that's why I'm obsessed with Eurovision and why I can whip my skirt off in 30 seconds at any given. No, I can't do that bit. And my first ever crush was developed watching the Eurovision Song Contest on the telly. 1992 because I'm an old lady, so I was 11 and I fell a bit in love with Michael Ball's dimples and he was doing one step at a time and doing his hair punching his do 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 and I think that was like a gateway drug into the musical theatre stuff and I would say he was like my biggest crush. And then when I watched him on Telly Addicts, because you know in the old days you used to highlight the radio times with what you wanted to watch. I think people still do that now, and that was like when that night my period started and I was like, oh my God, Michael Ball turned me into a woman. So that's a really weird segue, isn't it, from Eurovision, but it's all connected.
Oh, I love that. I mean,
I don't know why I said any of that.
I tell you what, I'm a big fan of Michael Ball. Like, he's just brilliant. I listen to him every Sunday on Radio 2. He is a joy. He's always
an absolute babe.
He is. You know what? I don't care what people say.
Love it.
Yeah. We are on this podcast. We are big fans of Michael Ball and Eurovision. And Eurovision. What a way to end the podcast!
I'm so sorry.
No, please never apologise. That was like a nugget of.
Maybe find the video of him performing and send it to you after this.
Please do. That would be incredible. Well, what a podcast! I hope that you've enjoyed every single second of this. I know I certainly have. Thank you again, Jen, for being just the best guest ever. If we want to find you on social media and see your work and read your work, where can we find you?
So I use the handle Renverse, so Ren as in Jenny Wren, so WREN and then VERSE as in poetry. And then the copy of the book is available on Written Off's website.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for listening and watching. If you're on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment. Leave us a comment on Spotify as well. You can do that now. I'm going to keep saying it because I'm not over it yet. But yeah, you comment your thoughts on Spotify and let us know what you're thinking. We are over halfway through the relaunch of the podcast, season 1. I can't believe that. I genuinely can't. But we've got some amazing guests lined up for you in the next few weeks. And new episodes will be landing every Friday, 9 a.m. So be there or be square. But yeah, thank you again, Jen. You've been amazing.
Thank you very much.